The bells rang at 5:30, a familiar sound that had marked the start of Sister Agnes's day for 43 years. In her small, sparse room, she opened her eyes. The walls were bare, holding only a simple wooden cross. This was her home, her life, a life of quiet peace she had chosen back in 1981. She was 68, and her hands told a story of labor. Wrinkled and spotted with age, they were the hands of someone who had washed floors, tended gardens, and cooked for decades. But a closer look revealed a certain grace, a lingering elegance in her long fingers. As she walked the silent halls of the convent of St. Benedict toward the chapel, her soft footsteps echoed on the old stone. The very walls of this 200-year-old building seemed to hum with prayer. Here, with 22 other nuns, most of them elderly like herself, her day began. The rhythm of her life was simple and unwavering. Pray, work, eat, work, pray, sleep. This was the vow she had taken: poverty, chastity, and obedience. She found contentment in this routine, never complaining. It was the life she had chosen. But every day, in the corner of the common room, a challenge to her peace sat covered in a faded cloth, an old upright piano. It was a relic, a piece of furniture to everyone else, a place to stack old hymnals. For Sister Agnes, it was a ghost. She felt a familiar tightness in her chest each time she saw it, a feeling she quickly pushed away as she set out bread and jam for breakfast. What no one in the convent knew was the secret she had guarded for over 4 decades. Before she was Sister Agnes, she was Catherine Webb, and Catherine Webb was a concert pianist, the kind of musician who sold out grand halls, who made critics rave and audiences weep. Her journey with music began at age 4. She was a prodigy, picking out melodies by ear before she could properly read. By 7, she was performing. By 15, she had a scholarship to the National Conservatory. Her teachers saw in her a rare, profound talent. They predicted she would become one of the greats. And for a time, she was. She toured the great cities of Europe, Paris, Vienna, London. Her recordings sold. Her name appeared in newspapers. She had fame, recognition, and a future that sparkled with promise. Yet, amidst the thunderous applause and glowing reviews, she felt a profound emptiness. The success, the glamorous life, it all felt hollow. Then, at 23, seeking refuge from the noise of Milan, she stepped into a small church. She sat in the back, listening to the simple, untrained voices of nuns singing their evening prayers. In that moment, a profound peace washed over her, something she hadn't felt in years. 2 years later, she made a decision that shocked the world. Catherine Webb, the brilliant pianist, gave it all away. She donated her piano, sold her possessions, and entered the convent. Her family was bewildered, her agent furious. But she had found something more valuable than applause. Mother Beatrice, the head of the convent at the time, had been clear. "Your old life stays outside these walls," she had said. "Music for personal glory has no place here. We sing only to praise God." Catherine, who became Sister Agnes, accepted this. She buried her past, scrubbing floors and growing vegetables, learning to find joy in a bird's song or the smell of fresh bread. But the piano haunted her. She would dream of playing, her fingers dancing over phantom keys in her sleep. Sometimes, in the dead of night, she'd creep into the common room just to look at it, never daring to lift the cloth or touch the keys. She just stood there, remembering. Once, a decade ago, a burst pipe flooded the room. Another sister suggested getting rid of the old piano. To her own surprise, Sister Agnes spoke up, a little too quickly. "No, let's keep it." And so it stayed. Now, as she cleared the breakfast tables, her gaze fell once more on the covered piano. 43 years. More than half. Her life spent in silent service. She had made her choice, and she told herself she didn't regret it. But deep down, in a place she rarely allowed herself to go, a tiny flame still flickered. a whisper of a question. What if? What if she could play again, just once? What if that talent wasn't meant to be buried forever? She shook her head, dismissing the foolish, worldly thoughts. She carried the dishes to the kitchen. Her life was here now. The piano would remain silent, and her hands would continue their simple work. Or so she believed, right up until the day everything changed. In late September, a phone call shattered the quiet routine of a secluded convent. Mother Beatrice, the 84-year-old abbess, hung up and summoned Sister Agnes. A film crew, she explained, wanted to make a documentary about the religious life. They had chosen this very convent, a place so far removed from the world that visitors were practically unheard of. Sister Agnes felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. The idea of cameras, of strangers intruding on their peaceful existence, felt like a violation. But Mother Beatrice was calm. "Perhaps," she said, her voice raspy with age, "it's good for people to see how we live." The following week, a small van arrived. David Chun, a young documentary filmmaker, and his two-person crew stepped out, their arms laden with equipment. They promised to be respectful, to simply observe the daily rhythm of prayer, gardening, and quiet contemplation. For a few days, they did just that, their cameras becoming a silent, unobtrusive presence. Sister Agnes, however, did her best to avoid them, to melt into the background where she had felt comfortable for over 40 years. On the third day, everything changed. While setting up a shot in the common room, David accidentally bumped into a large, cloth-covered object in the corner. He lifted the cover, revealing an old piano. "Does this still work?" he asked, a spark of curiosity in his eyes. Sister Catherine laughed. "That old thing? No one's played it in decades." But David was intrigued. He opened the keyboard. The ivory keys yellowed with age, and pressed middle C, a note rang out, surprisingly clear. "Does anyone here play?" he asked the room. The sisters exchanged glances, most shaking their heads. Sister Agnes froze, her heart starting to pound against her ribs. She kept her eyes fixed on the napkins she was folding, praying no one would look her way. But Mother Beatrice's quiet voice cut through the silence. "Sister Agnes studied music," she said. "Before she came to us." The room fell still. Every eye turned to Sister Agnes. In 43 years, her past had been a sealed chapter, an unspoken agreement between her and the abbess. That life was over. David's face lit up. Here was the story, the human element he'd been hoping for. "Really? What did you play?" he asked gently. Sister Agnes felt exposed, her protective shell of anonymity shattered. When she couldn't find her voice, Mother Beatrice spoke again. "Piano. She was quite accomplished, I believe. Would you play something for us?" David pressed, his filmmaker's instinct kicking in. "Just a short piece?" "It would be wonderful for the film." Sister Agnes shook her head, the words tumbling out. "No, I couldn't. It's been too long. I've forgotten everything." But Mother Beatrice intervened. "Perhaps you could play a hymn," the old woman suggested, her tone unreadable. "Something we sing in chapel." Sister Agnes looked at the abbess, searching for meaning. For decades, the message had been clear. Worldly pursuits were a distraction from the spiritual path. And now, she was being pushed back toward the one thing she had so deliberately left behind. The other nuns watched, their faces filled with a new kind of curiosity. With trembling legs, Sister Agnes walked to the piano. Each step felt heavy, like she was walking back through time. She was 68 now, her hands rough from decades of work in the garden and kitchen. The last time she'd performed, she was 25, a confident young woman with a promising future. She sat down, her shaking hands hovering over the cool, smooth keys. She chose a simple hymn, Amazing Grace, safe, appropriate. The first few notes were hesitant, her fingers stiff and clumsy. But then, a miracle happened. Deep within her, a forgotten muscle memory stirred. Her fingers, seemingly with a will of their own, began to move with a long-lost grace. The simple melody grew, blossoming into something rich and complex as her left hand found the chords, the harmonies, the soul of the music she thought she had buried forever. The piano, silent for so long, sang under her touch, its voice filling the room with a sound so beautiful it was heartbreaking. The film crew, the other nuns, everyone was frozen, captivated. David had quietly signaled his camera operator, who was now capturing the raw, unexpected moment. Tears streamed down Sister Catherine's face. "I never knew," she whispered to the sister beside her. "In all these years, I never knew." Sister Agnes finished the hymn, letting the final resonant chord hang in the air, vibrating through the wood and into her very bones. Something inside her, a door locked for 43 years, had just been blown wide open. She stood up abruptly, a wave of embarrassment washing over her. "That's all I remember," she said, her voice sounding strange and distant. But everyone in the room knew it was a lie. David was beaming. "That was beautiful," he said, his voice full of awe. "Truly beautiful. Sister Agnes, you have a real gift." She looked down at her hands, the hands that had tended the earth and prayed for salvation, and now had once again created music. Had, she corrected him quietly, though a part of her wondered if that was still true. "I had a gift." That was a long, long time ago, but as she walked away from the piano, she couldn't ignore the feeling that she hadn't just been playing for the camera. She had been playing for herself, reconnecting with a part of her soul she thought she had lost forever in the quiet halls of the convent. And in that moment of unexpected music, she found a grace more amazing than any hymn could describe. But as she returned to her seat and picked up her tea with still shaking hands, she knew something had changed. The door she'd kept firmly shut for 43 years had been pushed open, just a crack, and the light that came through that crack was both terrifying and thrilling at the same time. That night, Sister Agnes lay awake in her small room, staring at the ceiling. Her fingers kept moving, playing invisible keys in the darkness. She could hear melodies in her head, pieces she'd performed decades ago, coming back with crystal clarity. Chopin, Beethoven, Mozart. They were all still there, waiting. She pressed her hands flat against her blanket, trying to make them stop. This was dangerous. This was exactly what she'd been trying to avoid all these years. She'd made her choice. She'd given up that life. But oh, how sweet those few minutes at the piano had felt. How right. The documentary crew left after a week, but the footage they captured didn't leave with them. David had been so moved by what he'd witnessed that he worked day and night editing the material. 2 weeks later, he showed a rough cut to some people in the nearby village. Word spread quickly. By the time the video clip appeared online, shared by the local newspaper's website, it had already created a buzz in the small community. People watched the elderly nun in her simple habit sitting at the dusty piano, her weathered hands bringing forth music that seemed to transcend time itself. The comment section filled up within hours. "This made me cry. Her playing is absolutely beautiful. I can feel every note in my soul." The video kept spreading. 10,000 views, 50,000, 100,000. National news outlets picked it up. Within a week, Sister Agnes's face was being seen across the country, though she had no idea. The convent didn't have internet or television. They lived in their quiet world, untouched by the chaos of social media and viral videos. It was the mayor of the village who came to the convent gates on a Friday afternoon. Robert Castellano was a kind man in his mid-50s who had always respected the nuns and their way of life. Mother Beatrice received him in the small visiting room, with Sister Agnes present at his request. "Mother Beatrice," he began, settling into the uncomfortable wooden chair. "I'm here with a somewhat unusual request." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Every year, as you know, we hold a charity concert in the village hall. The proceeds go to the children's hospital in the city. It's been our tradition for 27 years now. Mother Beatrice nodded slowly, waiting. This year, our featured pianist has fallen quite ill. She's been hospitalized, actually, and won't be able to perform. The concert is in 2 weeks, and we're desperate. He looked directly at Sister Agnes. I've seen the video of you playing. Everyone has. And I'm here to ask if you would consider performing at the charity concert. The silence that followed was heavy. Sister Agnes felt her stomach drop. She looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. Mother Beatrice's response was immediate and firm. Mr. Castellano, I appreciate you thinking of us, but that's not possible. We are a cloistered community. We've taken vows of separation from the world. Sister Agnes cannot go out and perform like some concert artist. That life is behind her. I understand, the mayor said quickly. I truly do, but please hear me out. This isn't about entertainment or fame. This is about helping sick children. Last year, we raised enough money to buy new equipment for the pediatric ward. The year before, we funded art therapy programs. And music is just a means to an end, a way to bring the community together for a good cause. Sister Agnes finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't possibly. I haven't practiced. I haven't performed in over 40 years. I wouldn't even know what to play. You played beautifully on that video, the mayor insisted. What you have isn't something that just disappears. It's still there. Anyone can see that. Mother Beatrice stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. I'm sorry, Mr. Castellano. The answer is no. We live according to certain rules, certain principles. We cannot simply set them aside, even for a good cause. I'm sure you'll find another pianist. The mayor left, disappointed but understanding. Sister Agnes returned to her duties, trying to push the conversation out of her mind. But it stayed with her, nagging at her thoughts as she worked in the garden, as she prepared dinner, as she prayed in the chapel. That evening, as the nuns gathered for their simple supper, the mood was quieter than usual. Sister Catherine finally broke the silence. I've been thinking about what the mayor said, she ventured carefully. About the sick children. Mother Beatrice gave her a sharp look. Sister Catherine, the matter is closed. But Sister Margaret, who rarely spoke up, surprised everyone by adding her voice. With respect, Mother, is it truly closed? Should it be? She was 71 and had been in the convent for 45 years. Her opinion carried weight. I've been praying about this all afternoon, and I keep coming back to the same question. What is the greater service to God? Following our rules of separation, or using the gifts He gave us to help His children? Our vows are not suggestions, Mother Beatrice said sternly. They are sacred commitments. If we start making exceptions, where does it end? Sister Agnes pushed food around her plate, unable to eat. The conversation swirled around her, the other nuns now joining in with their own thoughts. Some agreed with Mother Beatrice. The rules existed for a reason. They had all sacrificed their personal desires when they took their vows. Others felt pulled by the idea of helping the children. Wasn't their whole life supposed to be about service? That night, Sister Agnes couldn't sleep at all. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the dark ceiling, her mind racing. She thought about the sick children in the hospital, kids fighting battles no child should have to fight. She thought about her years of training, all that time and talent. Had it really been God's will for her to bury it completely? Or had she been hiding behind her vows, using them as an excuse to avoid the vulnerability that came with sharing her gift? She remembered something her first piano teacher had told her when she was just 7 years old. Music isn't about you, the elderly woman had said. It's about what you can give to others. Your job is to be the bridge between the composer and the listener. Your ego, your fear, your pride, none of that matters. All that matters is the music and what it can do for someone's soul. At the time, Sister Agnes had been too young to fully understand. But now, at 68, lying in the darkness of her small room, The words came back with new meaning. Over the next few days, she noticed something shifting in the convent. The younger sisters would glance at her with curiosity and something like hope. Sister Catherine squeezed her hand one morning after prayers and whispered, "Whatever you decide, I support you." Even Mother Beatrice seemed less certain. The old woman's face was troubled, and she spent long hours in the chapel, clearly wrestling with something. 3 days before the concert was scheduled to happen, Sister Agnes was working in the kitchen when Mother Beatrice appeared in the doorway. "Come with me," she said simply. They walked together to the small chapel where the nuns prayed 7 times a day. Mother Beatrice sat down heavily in the front pew and gestured for Sister Agnes to sit beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Mother Beatrice began, her voice tired and filled with something that sounded like regret. "I need to tell you something I've never told anyone here. When I was young, before I entered religious life, I sang. Opera, actually. I was training at the conservatory in Milan. I had a good voice, they said. Maybe even a great one." Sister Agnes turned to look at her in surprise. In all these years, Mother Beatrice had never mentioned her past. "When I came to the convent, I was told to leave that behind. And I did. I stopped singing anything but hymns. I locked that part of myself away and threw away the key." The old woman's hands trembled slightly in her lap. "I thought I was being holy. I thought I was making the ultimate sacrifice for God." She turned to face Sister Agnes, and there were tears in her ancient eyes. "But now, as I sit here near the end of my life, I wonder if I was wrong. I wonder if God gave me that voice to use, not to bury. I wonder how many people I could have brought joy to, how many hearts I could have touched. And I wonder if my silence was actually an act of obedience or an act of fear." Sister Agnes felt her own eyes filling with tears. "You have a gift," Mother Beatrice continued, "a real, genuine gift from God, and there are children who need help. Who am I to stand between your gift and their need?" She reached over and took Sister Agnes's hand. "I'm giving you permission to perform at the concert, not as a command, but as an invitation. The choice is yours." Sister Agnes sat alone in the chapel for hours after Mother Beatrice left. The afternoon light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting colored patterns on the stone floor. She prayed, but the words felt jumbled in her mind. Her heart was pulling her in 2 different directions at once. Finally, as the sun began to set, she made her decision. She would perform. The moment she decided, terror and excitement flooded through her in equal measure. She found Mother Beatrice in her office and simply nodded. The old woman smiled, a real genuine smile that made her look years younger. "Good," she said softly. "Now go practice. You have 3 days. 3 days." Sister Agnes almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Professional pianists practiced for months before a major performance. She hadn't seriously played in 43 years. 3 days was nothing. It was impossible. But she had no choice. That evening, after dinner, she went to the common room and sat at the piano. The other nuns had quietly made themselves scarce, giving her privacy. She lifted the cover and looked at the keys, taking a deep breath. Where to even begin? Her mind raced through the repertoire she'd once known by heart. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. She'd performed it dozens of times when she was young. It was technically demanding, but achingly beautiful. Yes, that would be the piece. She placed her hands on the keys and began the opening movement. Immediately, she hit wrong notes. Her fingers stumbled over passages that had once been effortless. The piano was badly out of tune, making everything sound worse. Frustration rose in her throat. She stopped and flexed her hands. They were stiff, the joints a bit swollen from arthritis. These weren't the hands of a 25-year-old concert pianist anymore. These were the hands of a 68-year-old nun who spent her days scrubbing floors and pulling weeds. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "Just start slow." She began again. this time at half speed, note by note, measure by measure. Her muscle memory was there, buried deep, but it was rusty. It was like trying to speak a language she hadn't used in decades. The words were still there, but they came out halting and uncertain. After 2 hours, her back ached and her fingers were sore. She'd made it through the first movement, but it was rough. Very rough. Doubt crept in. What had she been thinking? She couldn't do this. She would embarrass herself, embarrass the convent, disappoint everyone. Sister Catherine appeared in the doorway with a cup of tea. "I thought you might need this," she said gently. She sat down in a nearby chair and listened as Sister Agnes continued to practice. Her presence was comforting, supportive without being intrusive. The next morning, Sister Agnes woke before the bells. She'd barely slept, her mind running through musical passages all night. After morning prayers, she asked Mother Beatrice if she could skip her regular duties to practice. Permission was granted. She spent the entire day at the piano. Her fingers gradually began to remember. The passages became smoother. The music started to flow instead of stumble. But the piano itself was a problem. Several keys stuck. The tuning was so off that some chords sounded almost painful. That afternoon, the mayor returned with a surprise. He'd brought a piano tuner from the city, an elderly man named Giuseppe, who'd been tuning pianos for 50 years. "When I heard you were performing, I knew we had to fix this instrument," the mayor explained. Giuseppe worked on the piano for 3 hours, adjusting and tightening and listening with his trained ear. When he finished, the transformation was remarkable. The piano still wasn't perfect. It was too old for that, but it sounded 100 times better. "Try it now," Giuseppe said, stepping back. Sister Agnes played a few scales, then launched into a passage from the Moonlight Sonata. The difference was like night and day. The notes rang clear and true. She felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you so much," Giuseppe smiled. "I heard the recording online. You have a gift, sister. I'm honored to help." That evening, Sister Agnes practiced until her fingers were too tired to continue. She was making progress, but doubt still gnawed at her. The third movement of the Moonlight Sonata was incredibly fast and technically challenging. She'd played it flawlessly when she was young, but now her fingers couldn't move as quickly. Her stamina wasn't what it used to be. She made mistakes over and over. The same difficult passages kept tripping her up. Frustration brought tears to her eyes. Maybe this was a terrible idea. Maybe she should back out now before she humiliated herself in front of hundreds of people. Sister Catherine found her sitting at the piano with her head in her hands. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting beside her on the bench. "I can't do it," Sister Agnes said, her voice breaking. "It's too hard. I'm too old. I've forgotten too much." Sister Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that changed everything. "Maybe you're not supposed to play it the way you used to. Maybe you're supposed to play it the way you can now." Sister Agnes looked at her, confused. In a quiet convent, nestled away from the world's frantic pace, Live Sister Agnes. At 68, her days were a gentle rhythm of prayer, gardening, and quiet contemplation. Her hands, now tending to roses and kneading dough, once danced across the ivory keys of a grand piano. Before she took her vows, she was known to the world as Anya Petrova, a concert pianist of prodigious talent, a rising star whose music could silence a room and stir the soul. But a profound spiritual calling led her to trade the grand stages of the world for the serene silence of the cloister. And for 40 years, the piano in the convent's recreation room remained untouched by her. The music, she believed, belonged to a life she had left behind. One crisp autumn afternoon, Father Michael, an old friend and the director of a large citywide charity, paid a visit. His face was etched with worry. The charity, which supported homeless shelters and food banks, was facing a severe funding crisis. Their annual fundraising gala was approaching, but their planned headline performer had canceled at the last minute. "Agnes," he began, his voice heavy with the weight of his request. "I know it's been a long time. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't a matter of life and death for the services we provide. We need a miracle. We need you." Sister Agnes felt a jolt, a mixture of shock and a long-dormant tremor of stage fright. The world of concert halls, with its blinding lights and expectant crowds, felt like a distant, almost imaginary past. "Michael, I am Sister Agnes now," she said softly, her hands clutching the simple wooden cross around her neck. "Anya Petrova. She ceased to exist a long time ago. My hands are for prayer and service now, not for performance." Father Michael persisted gently. "But what if this is a different kind of service? Your gift, Agnes, it was given to you for a reason. Perhaps this is its purpose now, to bring hope and help to those who have none." His words lingered in her mind long after he left. That evening, drawn by an invisible thread, she found herself in the dimly lit recreation room. The old upright piano stood in the corner, covered in a thin layer of dust. Hesitantly, she lifted the lid. Her fingers, stiff and unaccustomed, hovered over the keys. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let them fall. The first notes were clumsy, uncertain. It was a simple scale, something a child would practice. A wave of frustration washed over her. The effortless fluidity she once possessed was gone, replaced by a painful stiffness. The muscle memory was a ghost, a faint echo in her hands. Doubt crept in. Was she being foolish? Was it pride that made her even consider this? Days turned into a week. Every night, after the convent had settled into silence, Sister Agnes would return to the piano. She started with the basics, painstakingly retraining her fingers. She played scales, arpeggios, and simple etudes by Czerny and Haydn, the very same exercises she had loathed as a young prodigy. Her knuckles ached, and her wrists protested. There were moments of sheer despair when a complex passage she once played with her eyes closed now seemed an insurmountable mountain. The other nuns, hearing the fragmented music wafting through the halls, would exchange knowing glances. They saw the struggle in her tired eyes, but also a flicker of a long-extinguished fire being rekindled. One night, as she wrestled with a particularly difficult section of a Chopin ballade, she almost gave up. The music wasn't just technically demanding. It was emotionally raw, a storm of passion and sorrow that she had locked away for decades. As she played, memories flooded back, the thrill of her debut, the pressure of competition, the loneliness of a life lived on the road. It was all tangled up in the music. Tears streamed down her face as her fingers faltered. In that moment of vulnerability, she wasn't a nun or a former star. She was just a woman confronting her past. She stopped playing and prayed, not for skill or success, but for guidance and strength. She asked not to be Anya Petrova again, but for Sister Agnes to be able to use Anya's gift for a higher purpose. A profound sense of peace settled over her. The fear didn't vanish, but it changed. It was no longer a paralyzing monster, but a familiar companion, a reminder of the challenge she was undertaking not for herself, but for others. The music was not about her ego or her talent anymore. It was a prayer and offering. With this newfound perspective, her practice transformed. The notes began to flow, not just from her fingers, but from her heart. The stiffness in her hands seemed to melt away, replaced by a mature, soulful grace. The music she made was different now. It lacked the fiery, youthful arrogance of Anya Petrova, but it possessed something far deeper, the wisdom, compassion, and quiet strength of Sister Agnes. The night of the concert arrived. The grand hall was filled to capacity, buzzing with anticipation. Backstage, Sister Agnes, dressed in her simple habit, was a stark contrast to the glitz and glamour around her. A familiar knot of stage fright tightened in her stomach. She could hear the murmur of the crowd, feel the weight of their expectations. She closed her eyes, her hand instinctively finding the cross around her neck. She thought of the warm beds and hot meals this night would provide. She wasn't Anya Petrova facing her critics. She was Sister Agnes, a servant answering a call. When her name was announced, a hush fell over the audience. She walked onto the stage, not with the confident stride of a virtuoso, but with the humble grace of a nun. She sat at the magnificent grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the bright lights. For a moment, she just sat there, allowing the silence to settle. Then she began to play. It was Bach, a gentle, intricate prelude. The notes flowed like clear water, pure and serene, washing over the hall. It was a prayer made audible. From Bach, she moved to Chopin, not the fiery ballade of her struggles, but a tender nocturne. The music spoke of longing, of peace found after a long journey, of love in its most selfless form. The audience was captivated, held in a trance. They were not just hearing music. They were witnessing a story, a testament to a life of devotion. When the final note faded into silence, the hall remained still for a beat, as if no one dared to break the spell. Then the applause erupted. It wasn't just polite appreciation. It was a thunderous, heartfelt ovation that shook the very foundations of the hall. People were on their feet, many with tears in their eyes. They had come expecting a performance. They had received a blessing. Sister Agnes stood and gave a simple, humble bow. A gentle smile graced her lips. In the reflection of the grand piano, she saw not the ghost of a past life, but the joyful face of a woman who had finally understood the true purpose of her gift. The music had never left her. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to serve. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of inspiration. Have you ever felt like a part of you is left behind? A talent tucked away in the attic of your memory? Today, I want to share a story that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about second chances. It's the incredible story of Sister Agnes, a woman whose silence spoke volumes, but whose music would ultimately change the world. Imagine a quiet convent, the days marked by prayer, service, and gentle routine. For 43 years, this was Sister Agnes's life. To the younger nuns and the community she served, she was a figure of serene devotion, her hands often busy with mending clothes or tending the garden. But hidden within those hands was a secret, a gift that had been dormant for nearly half a century. Before she took her vows, Agnes was a concert pianist, a prodigy whose fingers danced across the ivory keys, creating magic. Her music had filled grand halls, her future seemingly written in the stars of the classical music world. But she chose a different path, a life dedicated to God. And with that choice, she closed the lid on her piano, believing that chapter of her life was over forever. She never spoke of her past. It wasn't a sad secret, but a choice she had made with a full heart. Yet sometimes, in the quiet of the night, she would trace the patterns of a sonata on the wooden table in her small room, her fingers remembering what her voice never spoke of. The music lived on, a silent symphony within her soul. Now, let's shift our focus for a moment to the local children's hospital. It was a place of hope, but it was also a place in desperate need. The building was old, the equipment was failing, and they were facing the very real possibility of having to close a vital wing, the one dedicated to the most vulnerable young patients. The community rallied, holding bake sales and car washes, but the amount they needed was staggering. The news reached the convent, and a sense of helplessness settled over the sisters. They prayed, they donated what little they had, but it felt like a drop in the ocean. One evening, during their community meeting, the Mother Superior announced the grim fundraising total. The mood was somber. It was then that a young novice Sister Mary, who had recently discovered a dusty, forgotten photo of a young Agnes at a grand piano, spoke up hesitantly. "Mother Superior," she said, her voice barely a whisper, I heard Sister Agnes used to be a musician." All eyes turned to the elderly nun. Sister Agnes, who rarely spoke outside of prayer, simply looked down at her hands. The room was silent. The Mother Superior, a wise woman who knew every soul under her care, looked at Agnes with a gentle, questioning gaze. After a long moment, Sister Agnes looked up, a flicker of something long extinguished rekindling in her eyes. "I was," she said, her voice soft but clear. "A long time ago, an idea, bold and almost unbelievable, began to form. What if Sister Agnes played again? A benefit concert. It seemed impossible. 43 years is a lifetime. Could her fingers still find the notes? Could she still command the stage? The doubts were many, but the need was greater. When the Mother Superior proposed the idea, a wave of shock went through the convent, followed by a surge of excitement. They all looked at Sister Agnes. She closed her eyes, and in the silence you could almost hear the ghost of a melody. She took a deep breath, a breath that seemed to span 4 decades, and nodded. "For the children," she whispered. "I will try." The news of the concert spread like wildfire. The Silent Nun Symphony, the local paper called it. At first, people were curious. An old nun playing the piano? It was a novelty. But then, whispers of her past began to circulate. Whispers of a prodigy who vanished from the music scene. Tickets began to sell, first out of curiosity, then out of genuine anticipation. An old grand piano was tuned and moved into the city's historic theater. For Sister Agnes, the weeks leading up to the concert were a journey back in time. Her fingers, stiff from years of disuse, were clumsy at first. The melodies were fragmented, the chords uncertain. There were moments of deep frustration, moments she wanted to give up. She would sit at the piano, tears welling in her eyes, the music she loved feeling like a stranger. But the thought of the children, of their tiny faces in the hospital beds, pushed her forward. Her fellow sisters rallied around her, bringing her tea, massaging her tired hands, and praying with her when her spirit wavered. Slowly, painstakingly, the music began to return. It was like watching a frozen river thaw in the spring. First a trickle, then a stream, and finally a rushing, powerful current. The muscle memory, buried so deep, reawakened. The music wasn't just in her fingers. It was in her very soul, and it had been waiting. The night of the concert arrived. The theater was packed. Every seat was filled. Backstage, Sister Agnes stood in her simple habit, her hands trembling. She wasn't the confident young performer she once was. She was a woman in her 70s, about to face her biggest fear and her deepest passion. The Mother Superior held her hand. "Agnes," she said, using her given name for the first time in years. "God gave you this gift. It was never meant to be silent forever. Go and share it." Taking a deep breath, Sister Agnes walked onto the stage. A hush fell over the audience. She looked so small, so humble, sitting before the imposing grand piano. She closed her eyes for a moment, said a silent prayer, and then she placed her fingers on the keys. The first note of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the hall. It was perfect. It was more than perfect. It was imbued with a lifetime of love, of loss, of devotion, of quiet contemplation. The music that flowed from her fingers was not the flashy performance of a young virtuoso. It was something deeper, richer, and infinitely more moving. It told a story, her story. The audience was captivated. People who had come for a novelty found themselves witnessing a miracle. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. She played for 2 hours. Bach, Beethoven, Chopin. Each piece was a revelation. It was as if 43 years of silence had concentrated the power of her music, turning it into something pure and transcendent. When the final note faded into silence, the audience was completely still for a moment, as if waking from a dream. And then the theater erupted. The applause was thunderous, a wave of gratitude and awe that washed over the stage. People were on their feet, shouting, weeping. They weren't just applauding a piano performance. They were applauding a life, a sacrifice, and the beautiful, undeniable truth that it is never, ever too late. The concert raised more than enough money to save the children's hospital wing. It became a local legend, a story told and retold. But the true miracle wasn't just the money. It was the transformation in Sister Agnes herself. The music didn't leave her when the concert ended. She started teaching piano to children in the community, her gentle hands guiding their small ones. The convent, once so quiet, was now often filled with the sound of scales and simple melodies. The joy had returned, not just to her, but to everyone she touched. Sister Agnes's story is a powerful reminder for all of us. Maybe you have a paintbrush collecting dust, a novel half finished in a drawer, a language you once loved but stopped speaking. We all have a piano we close the lid on. We tell ourselves it's too late, we're too old, we're not good enough anymore. But Sister Agnes proves that our gifts don't have an expiration date. Your passion, your talent, your unique song, it's still there, waiting for you. It's never too late to lift the lid, place your fingers on the keys, and play your music for the world. You never know whose life you might change. It might even be your own. Thank you so much for watching and for letting me share this incredible story with you. If it touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories that inspire. What's a talent you'd like to rediscover? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep listening for the music in your own life.